This is Paul Nobles from EatPerform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to the folks.
Hi, everybody.
So I've kind of been on an extended vacation with, going to the CrossFit Games and uh, um, on vacation. So I'm kind of out of the loop. And so we do have a couple questions right off the bat, so I think we're just going to jump into that. There's some interesting things happening, and so we'll probably talk about that as we start to kind of fill in some of the gaps. But if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask those, because the one thing that we don't like is to get a bunch of questions at 7:45. Typically we try to end this in about an hour, and it usually works out pretty good that way. If they go long, it's not bad. It's not the first time it's ever happened, but if you already have a question, just go ahead and ask it, and then we can get to it a little bit quicker. So Jennifer was asking, she's been doing CrossFit for a year and a half and ETP loosely for about 8 months, starting Outlaw this week. April, are you familiar with Outlaw and how that works?
A little bit, yeah.
So basically, for people that don't know, there's like, it's sort of funny, I was talking to my wife about this. CJ Martin is Invictus, and a lot of people follow his programming, but they tend to be West Coast. East Coast tends to be Ben Bergeron. Ben is the head coach at CrossFit New England, and April, you would know him because he's Caitlin's coach. And then there's Rudy Nielsen, who does this Outlaw blog, all of which you can sort of do on your own in your garage gym, during open gym, things of that nature. So that's what Outlaw is, and that's what she's referring to. So she's starting Outlaw this week, and want to make sure that I'm properly fueling to maximize my performance and also to be able to sustain the workouts. Typically, I think you're going to want to up your calories right off the bat, because it's pretty intensive stuff, April. The idea is to get you ready to compete in CrossFit competitions and potentially the CrossFit Games. Pretty much everyone that does the programming, Austin Harris does the programming. I don't know if you remember Austin.
I do.
But he, he's, I don't know if you've seen him recently, but he's jacked.
Jack, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. She's saying her biggest issue now is that she works during the day, and by the time I'm driving home at night, I'm super sleepy at 4:30ish. I train at 6 p.m. There will be heavy lifting, then a strength skill, and a Metcon, and I don't want to be burnt out by the Metcon. Wondering ideal time to eat, what to eat, and how to sustain energy during WODs, which aren't happening until almost 2 hours post-eating. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I'm curious as to if she's low carbing up till her pre-workout meal, because I think that she may be getting tired in the afternoon because she's not having any carbs, possibly. Or it could be that she's possibly having too many carbs.
Yeah, she did ask the question at about 6:50. So Jennifer, if you're still around and you're listening to this, she says yes, keeping protein, fats during the day. So yeah, I think you might have figured something out right off the bat. What are your thoughts in terms of kind of ramping up towards this like amazing amount of workout?
I would say in her case, she would probably, because she works out so late, it's going to be hard for her. You're already recommending that she increase her total caloric intake, which is going to mean basically her carbs are going to go up. Because she works out so late, it's probably going to be difficult for her to strategize all those carbs around the workout. I think energy level-wise, it will probably help her if she was to add a little bit of carbs in with lunch, and it could even be 20, 30 grams of carbs, and then focus on having a larger carb protein, maybe a little bit of fats, maybe around 3 o'clock or so before she works out.
She says she's 5'7", 135 pounds. Weight has gone up 20 pounds since 2012 and down 5 since January. Have no food fear, so I'm perfectly fine with eating more carbs. Um, just being very familiar with weights of people who CrossFit, and especially people who CrossFit and try to go to the CrossFit Games, not uncommon for a 5'7" person to be 150, 155 pounds, and incredibly muscular. As an example, I think most people know that we do work with Danielle Horan. She's 5'5", 153, something of that nature. So there could be some potential muscle building along the way. The one thing that I would add to April's recommendation is some level of intra workout. And I know we were talking off air about Austin Harris, or maybe that was on air, um, and he does intra workout and also does outlaw. Certainly not during a WOD, but during the lifting sessions, that would be a good idea. Um, and so, yeah. Any other thoughts on what our questions are, or Jennifer, do you think we've covered it well enough?
Does she need any ideas as to how many carbs she should be eating? Is she eating enough?
Yeah, I'm curious if she's talked to anybody in the science lab.
And I definitely 1,000% agree with the intra-workout carbs.
She said she'd be comfortable gaining weight. The extra carbs during the day seems like it could be the solution. Oh, that was the other thing. Now this gets tricky, so just be careful with it. But I would have caffeine at some point. Let's see. She said she's been on the forums. I think I'm set on macros. Tend to be a little high on fat, so need to monitor that. The one thing I would say to you with the caffeine recommendation, typically I take Vivarin. Uh, like lately, like today as an example, I ended up taking, um, doing a triple espresso before my workout. When I do like a triple espresso, I do it like an hour and a half before. If I take a Vivarin, I can typically take it 30 minutes before. Usually more effective on the lifting days, but I would think that for your level of volume, that would be good. She said caffeine in the afternoon and evening. Well, see, that's the thing you have to play with. Okay, you have to play with the dosing of it. Um, as an example, let's see, I'll do 2 cups of coffee, but never tried it late. See, the thing with coffee. Well, first of all, coffee's not as good as Vivarin. Um, Something like espresso might be a little bit better. You don't want the problem with that you have with coffee is that you have like this amazing volume. So you kind of want the volume to be as little as possible because it'll affect your workout. There's 2 approaches to this. Okay, one approach is you drink it around 2 o'clock, so then it's still got a little bit of oomph, around 5:30 when you work out. The other approach is to deal with the dosing, and so like Vivarin as an example. Is 200 milligrams, I believe, of caffeine, and so you might want to have it, just cut it in half um, before you take it previous to your workout. So the problem that you run into, like I've taken 400 milligrams, around 4 or 5 o'clock. I'll work out, so I kind of get a little amped up from the workout, but then I also still kind of amped up from the caffeine, and all of a sudden you stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning. You kind of want to be careful with that. So yeah, that's the story with caffeine. But I would, can I spell Vivarin? It's Vivarin. You can get it at any, Walgreens, CVS, something of that nature.
I
But
would
I think,
say. my opinion in regards to the caffeine is just kind of playing around with it. If she's
Yes.
if she's sensitive to caffeine, 200 milligrams is probably a lot to have that late. I know me personally, I used to do caffeine pills, which one pill is 200 milligrams prior to my training, usually an hour or so before, and it would actually make me kind of shaky and nervous, and would make me weaker during my training. But yet I can do things like coffee. And we actually had this discussion in the forum recently, and there's a lot of our members that are really liking the Starbucks apparently has, I think it's the Starbucks, the V or the View. It's like a little concentrated coffee shop that you can buy now that Mike Nelson was actually talking about how he loved it, where it's just a little bit, but you get a big boost of caffeine with it.
Yeah,
So
because
you're,
that's what you want. What you want is enough of the reaction without the incredible volume, because you don't want that weighing on your stomach. And it's not as good as, say, water, though. Some of the science on whether coffee dehydrates you is sort of shaky. It's sort of been proving that it's not as bad as people think. Um, but in general, the idea is to get your caffeine in kind of concentrated doses, and then get your water from water. And so that'd be interesting. I would try that out because, like I said, the last couple of days, some days I just like to have espresso because I like the coffee flavor. Um, and Vibrant, it definitely does the trick. Um, like you know, if you are at a powerlifting gym, as an example, very, very routine for these guys to have 600 to 800 milligrams of caffeine before their workouts. One, because they're huge individuals, they can handle a little bit more. But two, it tends to be a little bit more advantageous for lifting. Um, it's not bad. Like most cardio, people are proponents of some level of caffeine. So I hope that helps. And I just like April said, be very careful with the dosing. Couple of ways you can do it is just by decreasing the milligrams. The other way to do it is to drink it around 2 o'clock. You know. And rather than closer to your workout at, say, 5 o'clock, and then you can have a regular dose and it just kind of lasts through the workout, because there's kind of the average is something like a 6 hour window. So I hope that helps. You can follow up if that didn't, but I think we covered that pretty well. Dylan was saying, in actually, April, you have a question, so let's not forget that. But we have a ton of questions, actually, that are coming in. See, Dylan's saying, in MetFlex, increasing resting metabolic rate is touched on, but I was wondering if you could elaborate on how exactly you would increase your calories over time effectively. Well, in terms of, it sort of depends on what you mean by increasing your calories over time effectively. But let's talk a little bit about metabolic rate, and the biggest thing that affects metabolic rate, and that's going to be your muscle and how you use that muscle. And so one of the things that we kind of obviously talk about a lot, it's in the name of the site, is you're trying to eat to increase your work capacity to perform, right? And so the basic idea is that if you can kind of fuel your workouts and provide enough energies at certain times, provide the right fuels and things of this nature, that you will end up getting better workouts. And because you're getting better workouts, your muscle turnover is better, and therefore your metabolic rate is better. Your resting metabolic rate, if you've ever done like a bod pod or anything like that, or check the Catch-Picard formula, is very affected by the amount of muscle that you have. But Abel, can you take the second part of the question? But I was wondering if you could elaborate on how exactly you would increase your calories over time effectively. So, can you talk a little bit about, some of the reverse dieting techniques that we have with
Well,
people?
exactly. The resting metabolic rate, which is exactly what you were touching on, the calories that you need just basically at rest, you were spot on. To slowly increase that over time, you need to add more muscle. And we have members who've been, with the Eat to Perform, a year or more, and as they've gradually, added more calories and added more muscle, it's kind of neat to see the trend in the bod pods, because the RMR always goes up. It always goes up a little bit, whereas before, when they only had X amount of lean body mass, they're like a female, her resting metabolic rate may have been 1,200 calories, and then slowly but surely it's increased up to 1,400 calories, or more over time, but basically, like what you said, you slowly add more muscle, and your resting metabolic rate is going to increase.
Well, let me give you an example of kind of what we're talking about. So let's say that if I said to you, every year for the next 10 years, you can gain 3 pounds of muscle. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, right? It's not something that's going to be like this extreme thing. And if I also said to you that you would gain some weight in the process, you might be for it, maybe a little against it, things of this nature. Well, if you replace, let's say, um, uh, for a 200-pound man, I'll use that as an example, and you replace 30 pounds of fat with 30 pounds of muscle, that's a 15% body fat change, right? So let's say that the man was 30% body fat, now he's 15% body fat, and you go, well, that's a wow, that's an amazing jump. Most people don't think of it like that, and they just think of it, well, I just want to diet down and be as little as possible. And I mean, the funny thing, I was kind of joking with a friend of mine at my gym, because my gym still has up my story, and it was like 4 or 5 years ago now at this point. And I was really super lean, in the single digits. Right now, I'm mid-teens, so it's not like I'm like obese. Um, but the guy said, "Wow, your story was so inspirational and things like this." And I was like, "Honestly, dude, I looked like a bobblehead doll." I said, my head was like so big, I didn't have like the muscle to support the way that I do now, and it's sort of interesting because I've started various things. I don't want to get too distracted, um, but I think that some of what we talk about of gradually working into this is sort of the approach. Now, in terms of like the reverse dieting approach, can you talk about that a little bit, April?
Yes. Generally, what I usually recommend is, depending upon where you're coming from, caloric, wise. Usually men can do a little bit better with slowly increasing 150, 200 calories a week on usually I recommend on your training days. If your overall calorie intake was substantially lower than what you should be eating on your rest days, then you basically want to increase, 200 calories every day for a week. Eat there for week and a half, and then make another increase, and then continue on until you reach your highest level. Usually, what I see, if you jump right into the calories, immediately, your body's it's going to react, and you're going to gain some weight. You're going to gain some weight. Some of it's going to be water, but some of it's going to be fat, because your body has been accustomed and used to eating the lower calorie intake for a period of time. But eventually, it will level off, and you'll stop gaining. Me personally, I think it, kind of eases the nerves and makes people feel better to gradually increase up to the levels, and then that way you don't experience the large weight gain, and you gradually let your body, allow it to adjust, gradually as you add the calories in. Um, you
There
know,
are
me, me personally, I went from, I'm just like every other female who ate 1,200 calories at one point, and I'm up to, 2,500 calories now, and eat that consistently, most days. The days that I don't work out, I'll still stay around, 2,200 calories on those days. So, it's a big difference in regards to how much food you can eat. And a lot of times I see, I don't know about you, Paul, I'm sure you hear it all the time, but someone that's eating lower calories, their body's accustomed to not eating as much. And if you jump right into, if you go from 1,800 calories to 3,000 calories, you're going to feel very bloated and very full, and you're going to complain that you can't eat the food, and, it just feels so, like you're just stuffing yourself. And if
Well,
you,
whether you're low carb or low fat, not to interrupt you, but it makes your cells more inflexible, and that's why you end up bloating, and your body takes a little bit of a while to adjust to it. It is sort of interesting though, because we were having a discussion today about food logging, and someone said, well, food logs aren't always great because people aren't always truthful, and that is true. One of the things that happens with a lot of people that eat super low, calories, and we see this a lot. I mean, first of all, I don't know how many. I mean, we see food logs all day long, thousands of food logs over the course of the couple of years that we've been doing this. In that time, how much alcohol have you seen on a food log, April?
I actually see a lot.
You do.
Yes, I actually see a lot, and I've had to have some private counseling sessions with, with some
Yeah, I
people
don't
in.
think a lot of people log their alcohol. That's what I was going to say is that, you'll often, the other thing that you'll often see is that people won't, log butter, when they're cooking and things of this nature. But more importantly than that is that all of a sudden, like Friday, there's like no entries, and then you'll talk to the person, they're like, well, yeah, Friday's my cheat day. Well, if every other day you're doing 1,200 and then you're doing 4,000 on Friday, well, we got to talk about the average, And because your cells are relatively inflexible, we're sort of run into a little bit of a problem there. And so I think that a lot of time people need to be more, realistic about, yeah, that was the other scenario I got distracted. The other scenario, other than a cheat day, is that sometimes when people eat too low too often, they'll binge, and that often doesn't end up on food logs. And so you got to keep all of these things in mind. So I would say as you're starting to increase your calories, we need to be very realistic about the alcohol that you drink, any cheat days, which we prefer you not have because, as a general rule, you should be eating enough food that would allow for you to eat foods that you enjoy on occasion rather than, eating them all of the time. And so Dylan hasn't really followed up with any questions, so we've got a lot of questions today, so I'm going to keep moving. But if you think of anything, April, that you want to throw in, you can go right ahead and we can do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to move to the next question.
I was going to address Sheila's question real quick.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. So Sheila, she just had a quick question and inquired as to she usually works out early in the morning, and said that because she works out so early in the morning, does she have to eat all of her training day calories on her workout day, and then if the following day is a rest day, basically if today is a workout day and she's working out super early this morning, should she eat like a training day if she's resting tomorrow? Now, just to give
Are you
you,
asking me or are you going to answer it?
I started to say, just to give you some more details, she actually she's made great success with losing weight. I think she's lost 70 some pounds, but she's 5'6" and she's 205, currently 205. So because she trains so early and because, obviously she would be factored into the extreme fat loss category, then my suggestion would be going into a rest day, I think that she could make that day a semi-controlled day as long as she loads carbs around her workout and then control for the remainder of the day.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've had this. I always get in trouble with you when I say this, but I'm a firm believer that you do not have to have post workout carbs in that instance. Um, and so much so that I'm doing it today. I think people are unrealistic about what this all means. You really need to make sure that you're getting amounts correctly, right? But um, and I'm probably going to work out tomorrow, so I probably will have some level of carbs tonight. But if I see the WOD and it's like some 45-minute grinder or something like that, I'm just going to take tomorrow as a rest day because I've actually been working out a fair amount over the last week, and I've had two big lifting days in a row. And so for someone with a lot of fat to lose, absolutely. I like, for that person to go into that workout relatively fueled from the night before, right? Make sure that they're eating adequate amounts of food, um, but you can certainly have a good amount of food post-workout. It can be relatively low carb. Have that as a relatively low carb and low calorie day, and then is she saying that the workout day and then the very next day is a rest day as well?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Paul's evil lab that April hates. And trust me, like Suzanne and Stacy, we're working with them. We have a few gyms that we work with, and they sort of get frustrated with this a little bit too because in general, there's no reason why she couldn't have some carbohydrates. But my argument for not having carbohydrate post workout is your body's going to figure it out no matter what, right? It's going to start to use your reserves, and so having a lowish carb, lowest calorie day going into that rest day. If she works out in the morning, she's probably going to work out in the morning 2 days later, right? So she's going to want to have carbohydrates the night of her rest day anyway. So in theory, we want to have like about a 36-hour window where she's eating relatively low carb, relatively low calorie. And the nice thing about a person in that situation that has lost 70 pounds, you're going to lose 70 pounds in kind of an extreme deficit type situation. So she's pretty comfortable being uncomfortable at this point. But what we do with Eat to Perform is we sort of slow things down. It's almost like a diet break for this person because she's going to up things up around her workouts, and then she's going to go lower. Now, if, for instance, she feels uncomfortable, she can certainly add, 30 grams of carbohydrates post-workout. It's not like, that's going to be a great detriment one way or the other. But the scenario that I'm presenting basically allows her to tap into kind of her reserves. Now, we're talking about someone that has a lot of fat to lose. We don't want everyone doing this, especially people that are already lean, because it'll be detrimental to your muscle. When somebody has a lot of fat to lose, that fat actually serves as a level of protection for their muscles. So they won't atrophy the way that someone that, a woman that's 19% or a male that is 11%. So, we don't want those people going near it extreme. I was going to ask you, like, your carbohydrates as a relatively lean person on rest days is what?
I've actually increased them. They're up to about 250 now.
Yeah, that's on a rest day, and so that's what people need to understand. Actually, that's probably higher than what I eat on a rest day. Though right now I'm not trying to rest as much as possible, though I may need to soon. Do you think we answered that well enough? I mean, if for
Yeah, I
I do
don't,
want
I don't,
to
I don't agree about completely avoiding carbs post workout. My opinion is that she should load a little bit of carbs and protein post workout, cut her calories down overall for the day, maybe save 30 grams with dinner or so just so she can sleep better. So basically use that as a semi-controlled day. So maybe aim for 125 grams of carbs or so that day, rather than say 200. And then the following day, because it's a rest day, I still think that she can control that day and save, if she's aiming for 100 grams of carbs the following day, save 50 or 60 grams of carbs in starchier sources with dinner, and I still think that she'll be fueled enough for the following morning's training.
Yeah, I agree with you. The argument that April is making, I think, is a strong argument. The argument that I'm making, neither one is magic, right? What we're really talking about is overall caloric load, um, and how fat adapted your body ends up being, because the goal for a person like that is to be able to tap into their fat reserves, and you can do it either way. My argument is that uh, you know on occasion, um, that having less carbs post workout, um, it ends up being a positive. The only negative would be is if you're getting too hungry, you've gone too extreme with it. Like April was saying, you don't have carbs before bed, because you think that there's some kind of magic with it, and therefore you end up really stressed out, because you ate too little, and then you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's obviously not what we're trying to do. So you kind of have to find that balance and what feels the most right for you. And so, April threw out a scenario. I also threw out a scenario. And so try, to see which one fits for you, and then, give us some feedback, and on whether or not that worked. And if it didn't work, then, we'll come up with other scenarios for you. But you have two scenarios right there that you can try, and I think that'll end up being a plus for you. Is it okay if we move on to the next question?
Absolutely.
Okay, Renee is asking water consumption. If I drink the daily recommended amount, I feel I'm in the bathroom all the time. What role does water play in nutrition, and how much should be consumed? Um, I don't know if it's Raina or Renee, so maybe she can chime in. Um, what I know Janelle is always big into the water thing, and I agree with her. But what are your thoughts on water? Because some people react differently to water.
I think water is very important for, I think it's important for fat loss, but I also think that there's a fine line between trying to drink too much and, kind of forcing yourself to, to just constantly drink water all day. Generally, if you are hydrated well enough, then you will not be thirsty, and your urine will be. You want your urine to be like a pale yellow. You do not want it to be completely clear, and you don't want it to be bright yellow. Those are usually indicators in regards to water. I think a good balance is usually half of someone's body weight, unless they're very, very large. Also, that depends on how much someone sweats. If they drink, diet sodas, some of that stuff can usually kind of dehydrate you and make you want to drink more water. But, generally just based off of thirst, is my opinion.
Yeah, the thing that I always struggle with the water recommendations is, one, everybody reacts to it differently. Um, I mean, the one nice thing about metabolic conditioning or WODs, or things of that nature, is that you do get to sweat, and so you probably do need to replace that water. The one thing that concerns me with water and discussions of water is sort of if you ever look at like any eating disorder websites and things of this nature, one of the recommendations that they always make is make sure to drink tons of water so you always feel like you're full. And that's one of the problems that we're kind of want to run against, right? Because water doesn't really have a lot of nutrients other than, what it provides from a standpoint of hydration. So we want to make sure that you're hydrated, but we also want to make sure that you're not drinking so much damn water that you're not eating adequate amounts of food to kind of fuel this great work capacity that we're really trying to get people to do. And I kind of use that scenario of gaining 30 pounds of muscle over the course of 10 years. You do that with a combination of food and getting better at exercise. And so, water is going to be kind of a detriment to that if you're constantly drinking so much water that you artificially kind of repress your hunger signaling. And so that would be the one thing I would caution people with water. I'm not huge with water, but one of the things I did, when I started, because I don't know how many people know my story or what, but it always amazes me that a lot of people do know my story. But when I started at 225, one of the things that I did was I bought a pitcher of water. I don't like really cold water, so I had a pitcher of water, and I put it, on the island in my kitchen. And whenever I saw it, I just drank water. And to this day, I still do that, and that works really, really well for me. And so I think that April touched on it real well, and we can kind of move on from there. But that would be the only way that I would caution, is that too much water can be detrimental. So got it. Thanks. Don't drink alcohol and very little caffeine. I think that's. I don't know that don't drink alcohol at all. I think alcohol has a role. My wife, as an example, on date night, she always has a couple glasses of wine. If we go to, a Mexican restaurant, she'll have like a margarita or something. She's saying she doesn't drink alcohol. She doesn't like it. Yeah, that makes sense. And she drinks very little caffeine. So she's probably pretty hydrated as things go. So Janelle has a question, and for those that don't know Janelle, we have a very popular article with Janelle, and April, I'm assuming, knows her really well from the forums, and she's also a really well-known trainer in the blogosphere. And so she has a question about growth hormone release and late-night carb spiking. Oh, I'm going to love this one. Can you explain why eating carbs at night actually triggers growth hormone release? I'm reading a ton about this right now after diving into Netflix, as it is encouraged to get some carbs right before bed. Personally, wake up looking leaned after the nighttime carb spike. So pray tell, what's the deal here? Okay, so this would be a great question for Mike, and I think Mike could actually get into the science. But I've seen some of the science, and one of the things that it talks about is that sleep, as an example, sort of triggers. So, like, for those that don't know, pretty much everyone knows this for some reason, that Oprah kind of put it out there. She was kind of a mouthpiece for Bob Greene, and Bob Greene would say to people, like, don't have carbohydrates before bed because it triggers your insulin, which is an antagonist towards growth hormone. And growth hormone is sort of what leans you out. And, people were like, well, that makes logical sense. So for, many years, people started following this logic, and then a lot of people started realizing that they weren't sleeping as well because they weren't getting some carbohydrates, and basically your carbs at night turn into serotonin, which turns into melatonin, so therefore you end up sleeping better. So when you take out those carbs, you sort of artificially mess with your sleep. But some of the science points to the fact that when you sleep, um, that your body sort of shuts down that processes as quickly as possible to move you into these deep sleep cycles. But that's the real magic. That's the real answer to Janelle's question is when you provide the components for serotonin to do melatonin, which can also be affected greatly by the lights and the amounts of devices that you use at night. So, I typically sleep in all dark or as much dark as possible, and it makes a huge difference, believe it or not. Oftentimes, people will think that they um, that John Stewart relaxes them, and so it kind of takes their mind off of whatever the day's activities are, and therefore, they sleep better. My argument to that would be, you'd be much better off taking that hour to 30 minutes, having some downtime with your family or with your wife or whatever. Personally, I used to I used to think that I was an insomniac, um, and one of the things that I've started to figure out was that I was always kind of triggering my brain to be active, um, and when I was a professional poker player, I don't know how many people know that or not. You're always thinking, and so therefore, it took me a long while to calm down, and it took me a while to figure out how to work with that. And I never did as a poker player, but I did a lot better as I started to get healthy. But the real answer to Janelle's question is you want to have as many deep sleep cycles as possible throughout the night. You want to provide enough carbs, which basically break down the components that you need to get that deep sleep, and that is what leans you out. That is what triggers all of your restorative hormones. And what you'll see often in insulin-resistant people and things of this nature is that that insulin resistance actually sort of causes this negative as it relates to your restorative hormones, like IGF-1, like human growth hormone, all these things that sort of lean you out, and but also build. They're part of a building component as well, and so that
You know,
deep sleep is a big deal.
just I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well,
Just
go
to
ahead.
add,
I was
this is
done.
one of the reasons why I actually do cereal before I go to bed. Usually, hour and a half before I go to bed, I do a rather large bowl of cereal, and I'll do either plain rice cereal, Fruity Pebbles. It's always something gluten free. Whatever, but whatever sounds tasty to me or whatever. But I usually have that an hour and a half before I go to bed, and I literally, compared to what I used to do, I used to be the lightest sleeper, and I'd have to get up, 2, 3 times in the middle of the night, use the bathroom, the slightest sound, my husband turn over, anything, I'd wake up. Now I literally crash, and I have the deepest sleep, and literally have like these vivid, dreams that I remember like all night long. I never wake up and use the restroom anymore. First thing in the morning, I wake up like clockwork, 6:30 in the morning, without an alarm clock, but it's like the deepest, most refreshing sleep, that I've ever had in my life. It's just a huge difference.
Yeah, I think that some of that carbs before bedtime thing messed a lot of people up, and especially people that are prone to having low carbohydrate diets and things of this nature. Kind of paleo can be sort of low carbohydrate for a lot of people, and so a lot of people don't think of it that if you add the carbohydrates, the problem that I have with the cereal thing is not the cereal itself, but I struggle with milk. Like if I were to have milk at night, it would just like really mess up my stomach. So I think a lot of people would use almond milk there, maybe coconut milk.
Yeah, I
Um,
do. I do almond or coconut because I can't do the dairy either.
okay, yeah, like almond milk. That's interesting. I might try that. this summer we have this new Italian ice place, and so most nights we end up going to this Italian ice place during the summer. But uh, I'm like you, I don't struggle sleeping at all. I do wake up in the middle of the night. Um, I could maybe look at some of the uh, water intake, something of this nature, but some of it's age too. I'm a little older than April, so that's a factor.
Not by
Um, what now?
I said not by much.
I don't know. I think you're what, like 8 years younger than me or something?
I don't know. My birthday's next month. I'll be 37.
Yeah, you're 8 years younger than me. That's like a fucking lifetime. Trust me, I would gladly take being 8 years younger. Um, but yeah, so Janelle, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if Janelle's still here, but yeah, it's those deep sleep cycles that make such a big difference. And actually, one of the things that I started playing with a lot last time, because I cut 10 pounds, and then I'm actually cutting 10 more pounds coming into the next 10 weeks. But one of the things I played with was naps, and it certainly helped. Um, and that might be a good question for Mike to dig into, because there is a science element that frankly, we broke it down to the most simplistic part. But I'd be interested to have Mike do something. He does like these little charts and things of this nature. It's kind of fun to watch. Um, so Mary was asking, I was doing 2-a-day workouts. My macros were set at 160 protein, 90 fat, 225 carbs. If I'm cutting back to just one workout, should I also cut back on my macros? I was doing 2 WODs 3 times a week, and then 2 days of single WODs. April, what are your thoughts? And I mean,
It sounds
Mary,
like it sounds like she was already actually on the lower side.
yeah, I was just going to say, like, I didn't really do the math, but I mean, the math is basically she's got about 400 between the protein and the carbs, so that's 1600, and then the fats, yeah, it's 810. That's like 2410. That's not super low. We don't know. It sounds like she's 160 pounds. I don't know what her height is. But what we've been talking about a lot in this one gym that we work with Stacy and Suzanne, is that dieting is stress, right? And exercise is stress. And so in an ideal world, you're keeping both stressors away from each other. Now, obviously, there isn't an ideal world in most instances. But the more you can do it, the better. I would not assume, as an example, that your calories would need to go down, but we need to know a little bit more information. Why were you doing 2-a-day workouts? Was it preparing for a competition and things of this nature? She's saying the calories are 2255. That makes some sense. Okay, here she says she's 160 pounds, 5'1.5". So what were you training for something, or what was going on there? And also, do you know what your body fat percentage is? Because the body fat percentage is actually a big part of this equation, because she's, an Olympic lifter. She's got an Olympic lifting competition in October.
Yeah, no, she's eating closer on the moderately active and not very active.
Well, but she's only 5'1". Said she did a DEXA scan and it was stated at 102 pounds and 42 pounds of fat. Oh, she's kind of making it hard for me here. Um,
So she's a little over. She's in the 30s for body fat percentage.
yeah, it was confusing to read it. Um, yeah, well, DEXA scan is kind of weird because like BodPod throws in your bones and stuff. And so you have to sort of factor that in. She's saying she's around 29% body fat. Okay, so I am going to take this question more than April because there is one thing that I just constantly want to have a discussion with people. Quit dieting going into a damn competition. You know, every single person I talk to wants to lose weight for one reason or another, and then they go, "Well, I don't want to compete in 148, as a 148er, or as a man, I want to compete at 165. So how can you get me to lose 15 pounds?" Well, unless you're going for a world record or an American record or I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with this, April. Powerlifting has like a million federations, and there's like just a ton of records that honestly don't mean anything. Um, Olympic lifting's a little bit better, but still, the good majority of people are really working towards their own personal best, not best as it relate to world records, things of this nature. So my suggestion to you is, yeah, you probably don't need to be working out near as much as you were. The one thing that I would like to know is her age as well. Mary, can you hit us up with your age? Okay, she's 31. Okay, perfect. So,
I I actually estimated her being at 30. It was just a lucky guess.
okay. Honestly, okay. Do you have fat to lose? Yes. Could you, you know, as an example, let's say we wanted to get you from 29% to 25%. I always like to break down goals in chunks, right? And so for you, the chunks would be I'm going to go from 29 to 25. Okay, as I'm just going to round down to 1.5. So basically, we would have you lose 6 pounds. Okay, when would I have you lose that 6 pounds though? After your competition. You know, dieting only makes you weaker. It's going to, can you maintain strength? Absolutely. Can you maybe gain a little bit of strength? The argument is that you're really kind of working on skill at that point. I mean, could you gain a little bit of strength? In theory, you could, but I think most people find that if they gain strength in a deficit, they're probably working on, inefficiencies in their technique and form, right? So as long as you can be patient, what we would suggest to you is sort of keep your macros at that 2255 level. What I would like you to do is keep your weight stable going into the competition. I think the weight classes, well, I know that the weight classes for men powerlifting are like 165, 148. So she would be competing, in that 165 because it goes down, not up. I don't know if it's different for Olympic lifting. I think it's similar, though.
I think it's similar.
Yeah. So if I were you, this is actually the same suggestion that I make to James, because James, he's trying to compete at 165, and he's kind of wondering whether or not he should go up to 181. And I'm like, dude, quit overthinking it. You're not going to be an Olympian. You're not going to like break world records. If you're 170, just lift at 170. What's the big deal? But then Mary says, well, but I'm 29% and I'd like to get lower. Okay, we can address that, and we can have you dieting after that. But what we really want you to do is be the best you can at the competition. And so October is only a few months away. I don't know if it's early October or late October because you sort of run into the holidays. Honestly, a lot of people have struggles, um, you know, dieting during the holidays. And so, for me, I don't really have that big of a deal with it, though. I think like this current cycle that I'm on right now, um, basically will have me stopping around November 15th or something. And the idea that we have for you guys, Mary, is to go down gradually. And so you kind of lose that 6 pounds. We get you to 25 pounds. If at 25%. If, for instance, your calories went from 2255 to, let's say, 2100 or 2000, maybe then you might want to continue on. But probably I would not ask you to do that. The thing that I would probably ask you to do is to lose the 6 pounds in 6 weeks. So let's say that your competition is October 5th. I would have you lose 6 pounds right before Thanksgiving, go into the holidays, maintain that weight, and then probably get through the holidays, maybe even 4 to 5 months after that, and then we look at whether or not we want to go lower at that point. But what we want to do constantly, and everybody needs to hear this, you want to get the math up higher. It's when you hear April say, I have my carbs up to 250 on rest days, or I have my. We're not doing this as, oh my God, April's just like a carb freak, or we're doing this because we're trying to set the math in our favor that is going to allow us to get, to be the best version, both mentally and physically. More importantly, mentally, But I think that, one of the appeals to Eat to Perform is that you get to eat. I get that, but we're not eating just to eat. We're eating to be better. And we're eating to build muscle, and we're eating to lift more weights at Olympic lifting competitions. And oh, by the way, that's favorable for lean mass, and therefore that's favorable for fat loss. And so, the argument that I always get, like Spencer Nadolsky, we feature a lot of videos from him. We have a great video on cortisol that I'll be posting to the page real soon here. But Spencer kind of rolls in this like crowd of people that are always talking about fat loss, right? And they're always talking about deficits. And every now and again I go, do any of you guys ever push the top in? Do any of you guys, I never see any of these people lifting weights. I never see any of these people like going, oh my God, I just deadlifted 500 pounds. Meanwhile, everybody I know is trying to deadlift 500 pounds, trying to front squat 300 pounds, and up it, pushing the top end, and that's ultimately what you want to do. So I think if you can sort of stick at that 2255, maybe even push your calories up where you're not. A lot of time what people find is that they kind of set their calories at 2255, and then they never really check out whether or not 2400 or 2500 actually works as well, right? Because you might be able to stay weight stable at 2255, but just because you go to 2400 or 2500 does not mean that you will necessarily gain weight. And you go, well, gosh, I will have to work out more to maintain that. That's not always the factor either. There's something called NEAT, which is what's NEAT called? What's the acronym? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Yeah.
And so NEAT is basically what you do when you're not exercising. And oftentimes what people find is they end up walking around more. They end up, as they start to increase their calories in slight ways, they're less fatigued. We sort of talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking to the person that is going to outlaw, and she was getting tired at the end of the day and things of this nature. A lot of times those added calories will affect that, because a lot of people think that carbs make you sleepy, and carbs do make you sleepy in certain instances, but not always. Because you can be lethargic as it relates to having not enough energy intake to fuel the things that you do. And actually, what Spencer's one of the things that we hear a lot of, I don't know how much we get this in the forum or not, is should I get my cortisol levels tested? And the idea being that I can't lose weight because my cortisol levels are high. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, because you're exercising all the time and you're dieting too extremely. So if affect one or the other, like you maybe exercise a little bit less, or take a diet break and come back up to maintenance, magically that cortisol level starts to change in a significant way, and then
It's actually funny that you addressed about, every now and then, if she's maintaining 2255, every now and then, you maintain that caloric level in your workout days, but eventually you need to test the waters. I know for me personally, anytime I make an increase, and I usually will increase 100, 150 calories on my workout days, the scale will usually drop. The scale will usually drop a couple of pounds, and it will maintain and stay there, with the higher calories. So, I totally agree with you. Don't be afraid of, testing the waters, because I think.
I just came off of vacation. Okay, we were going through Wyoming. I kind of joke, but there's just not a lot of good food options, right? So you have to do the best you can. We stayed at a cabin. We were able to grill. Most breakfasts we had steak and eggs and pork chops and eggs and things of this nature, but a lot of the evening meals weren't that great. When we were on the road, we had to eat Subway way more than I would ever. God, I hope to never have to eat at Subway again. It's not that Subway's bad, and if you're, I'd rather see you eat hungry, or rather see you eat Subway than be hungry, But when you break it down to why there's an obesity epidemic, Subway doesn't really break down into a lot of protein. I was eating steak and chicken and things of this nature. It's not a lot of protein in this stuff. When you look at it on MyFitnessPal, the protein levels aren't that high because there's just so much damn bread. And yeah, you could say, well, could you have eaten salads? I hate salads, but I'm not going to eat salad every single time. A lot of times you eat salads and you're starving. I eat 3,000 calories a day. You can't get to 3,000 calories a day eating salads, And so, but kind of going off of what you're saying is when I came back, yeah, I was kind of a little inflamed from being in the car ride, kind of water retention, and then also eating kind of these inflammatory foods. Well, guess what happens? Within 2 days, I went from 162 to 158. I'm sorry, not 162, 182 to 178. I'm kind of in a time machine there. So, what April's saying is we'll often hold back our potential related to, our thoughts about food. And, a lot of times if you're at 2255 and you never really push to see whether that 24, 2500, you might struggle getting better. So, I'm getting long-winded because I haven't done this in a while and kind of handed off to April, so we're getting kind of backlogged on the questions. Muhammad was asking, what about early morning CrossFit workout? My problem comes later in the afternoon and I start feeling drained and sleepy. How can I overcome that? Well, in terms of early morning CrossFit, you're going to feel drained and sleepy um, often if you're not eating adequate amounts of food. And you want to make sure that you're eating carbohydrates the night before. You're going to want to have carbohydrates post workout, making sure that your lunch is proteins, fats, things of this nature. But I think that lethargy typically ends up being um, an inadequate amount of energy. What are your thoughts, April?
Um, I have this issue on Saturdays. Normally on the weekdays, I usually train anywhere between 10 and 11, take care of work stuff, errands, whatever, that type of thing. On Saturdays, though, me and my husband go to the gym. And, of course, Saturdays are my heaviest day. It's deadlift day. But I usually get there between 8 and 9. And I usually feel very tired very early on. I actually do a pre-workout meal and a post-workout meal. And then usually around 1 o'clock or so, I just want to curl up and take a nap.
What do you do?
Yeah, yeah. Normally I will if I can, but for the most part.
Right. I mean, I would suggest that to people is if you can take a nap, take a nap. I mean, even like a little 15-minute, during a break or something of that nature, just shut your eyes and that will refresh you in a lot of cases. But if you can't take a nap, take a nap. Um,
Absolutely. If I'm in a situation where I can take a nap, then I'm fine. If I can't, though, usually I will actually have a smaller meal with some carbs, protein, and a little bit of fat in it, and it boosts my energy levels right back up. So I'm usually good if I do that.
I mean, honestly, I just have coffee. You know, I mean, I either take a nap or I have coffee. You know, um, but I do think that if you're constantly lethargic, it probably comes down to energy levels, and it probably comes down to the things that you're eating that are affecting you that way. You know, because we talked about this a little bit earlier with the person that was sleepy going into workouts. You know, if you've been avoiding carbohydrates, maybe some level of carbohydrates is a thing that would sort of help you. I think that, when people think of fat loss too often, they tend to focus too much on the deficit, and it causes lethargy or lethargy. In one day, you might not see a negative, right? But let's say that you're supposed to be eating 2,800 calories, but every day you're eating 2,300 calories. After 2 months of doing that, your energy level is just going to be nothing. So you got to kind of keep that in mind. Um, let's see, Rob. We had a lot of questions. I mean, people asked a lot of questions early on per my request, and we were not able to get to all of them. Some of them actually are not even here, but hopefully they can watch it later. Rob was asking, new guy here. April started me off with a great program, got my macros dialed in, working towards getting there. She set me up 3,200 calories on training days. Question is, I got a DEXA scan showing 28.5% body fat. Is there a point in trying to go back and recalculate, or am I in good shape with the goals I'm working on? Well, he's not around for me to ask a question to him. But if I was to ask him a question, the question that I would ask is, how long have you been working out? And the reason why I would ask that is because if, for instance, he has been CrossFitting for 2 years, then yes, we have to have a discussion about body fat. But if he hasn't been CrossFitting, let's say he's been CrossFitting for a year or 2 years, or he's just starting to weightlift and things of this nature, you might not have to do very much to get under 20%. And frankly, there's a lot of folks walking around with much higher body fat percentages than 28%. 28% is not unhealthy unless, of course, you're living a sedentary lifestyle. Does that mean that you should be happy being 28%? No. He is saying that he did a DEXA scan. I will say that DEXA tends to be a little bit higher. Then he could probably go to a bod pod and get a 22% and feel a lot better about himself, you know. So kind of keep all those things in mind. These are just guidelines. I do like DEXA scan. I wish I had started with DEXA scan. Because I think it's a better standard and it ultimately would have kind of, had my progress. But the goal is to kind of settle in. I mean, would you make his recommendations different? I see you don't have all his information.
Yeah, I was actually gonna suggest if he wants to get with me in the forum. My thought is if he's at a healthy average for body weight, if his stats are healthy, then I wouldn't change anything, and he needs to focus on adding more muscle. If he's overweight, I think that we could adjust the protein down.
Yeah, because if he, yeah, because like let's say that he's 6 feet tall, and because there's a lot of runners that are in this situation where he's like 6 feet tall, he's 180 pounds, and he's 28% body fat. That's very common as a runner, right? So what we do in that situation is, yes, we would keep his calories higher because we want him to build muscle while and it's we've seen it over and over. There's a guy that's in this incubator group that we have named Pete. I don't know how I pronounce his last name. It's like Mongo. It's like French, which is interesting because Rob's last name is Terrio. I'm very familiar with these names because I'm from Louisiana originally. But Rob's last name, if I can't remember, I got a little distracted. But Pete put on 25 pounds of muscle in 3 months. And he was coming from, he's been an athlete his whole life. He's running a lot of triathlons, things of this nature. Once he started getting into CrossFit, he just started putting on muscle, left and right. And he was doing Need to Perform in the process. It's sort of funny because, I mean, we could post so many of these, these stories, but there's just so many of them. Like which 25-pound muscle game do you pick? But people don't want to think of it like that. They want to just think of it from the standpoint of reduction, and they don't see the value in the muscle, and the muscle is huge. So, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No. Like I was saying, it's dependent upon what his stats are. I'll post a recording in the forum, and if he wants to get with me, I'll review his stuff again, and then we can adjust it if we need to.
Yeah. Rob Terrio. It's Theriot. Maybe you can message him as well. But yeah, just check his weight because if he's kind of low on muscle, then his calories would want to stay the same. Francesca, she's 4'9", age 34, 113 body fat, with handheld 22.5%, which is perfectly healthy for a female. CrossFit 4 to 5 times a week, up at 5 a.m. and out the door at 5:15 to train a client, work out at 6:15. Where should I have the carbs and how much? I've been training with a teaspoon of coconut oil and coffee, but but I do too feel. I think she meant to say I do not feel optimal on it. Typically, in that scenario, I would still have the carbs the night before. A lot of people like the bulletproof coffee, which I think the argument for bulletproof coffee is that it will get your calories higher. And for a lot of people that are lower on calories, that might be a good thing. If it's not working for you, what I would suggest is some level of carbohydrate the night before. But the whole carbs the night before is sort of meant to say it's inconvenient. If you're in a situation with a client, right, and you feel like you can have a carb drink like a Vitargo or Waxy Maize or something of that nature, and that would affect your workout better, because as a trainer, you're probably more fit than most people, and you're already relatively lean. I would go ahead and try to have some level of carb drink or something, maybe like a protein bar, um, while you're training your client in anticipation of your workout. Because if you're saying that, you're having carbs the night before, and you're having coconut oil and coffee, but it doesn't feel like 100%, there's no reason to avoid carbohydrate the morning before. For most people, it just ends up being inconvenient, and so that's why we try to put their carbs, for, in the evening the day before. Um, I'm not sure if she's around. She's not around, so we'll have to look at that later. Do you have any thoughts on that, April?
No, I agree. Carbs the night before, and even if it's something where she just ate like an RX bar or something on the way to the gym,
Oof,
before
God,
she.
I love RX bars.
Uh,
I love RX bars. They're so good.
yeah, they're really good. She could have one like on the way to training the client, and then it could be kind of digested, whatever before she started her training. The Vitargo works amazingly well. The coconut oil, I'm not a fan. I'd rather eat some eggs or something.
I'd rather eat food.
Exactly.
Charisma was asking, hi guys, it's a workout question. I did some front squats this morning at 121. Felt a little electric shocks in my quads and both legs each time I stand up. Is this bad? I can't say that I'm even remotely familiar with that feeling. Um, and I don't know that April or I are really qualified to answer that question. Um, I mean, have you personally experienced anything like that, April?
Only if I've taken too much of a pre-workout.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've had like some issues with like my TFL and stuff. I know all the signs and symptoms of that. And relieving it, but not in the frontal quad area.
Yeah. I wish I could help you. The one thing that I would say is that in the forums you could message Mike. Mike's obviously a doctor of exercise physiology. You could also message Spencer Nadolski. That's the reason why we have those guys on staff. And so if you message them, they're usually pretty good at getting back to people and that type of thing. Um, she's saying it could just be a thing. I would not be overly worried about it unless it just starts to recur, you know. But if it's something that you feel a little uncomfortable with, um, you know, reach out to a few people. That's one of the great things about the internet. I'm a part of this CrossFit Masters group. And there's a lot of questions like that come up. So if you ever get a chance to be a part of a group like that, I don't know how old you are. If you're over 40, just request to be in this CrossFit Masters group because there's like 10,000 people in it. It's actually like CF Masters, if you want to look into it. Anita is going to be our last question. Let's see. Anita is no longer here. The audio went out, and I missed what you said about insulin-resistant people eating carbs before bed. I wasn't really talking about insulin-resistant people eating carbs before bed. What I was talking about was if you're insulin resistant, because oftentimes people will get insulin sensitive, which is good. Insulin resistance is bad. Insulin resistance is simply, it's ultimately what leads to diabetes, type 2, things of this nature, and obviously type 1 is insulin resistant, and so they have to artificially take in insulin to deal with that. And so insulin resistant people eating carbs before bed, I wouldn't say that that's a negative or a positive one way or the other. It's not something that I can speak on intelligently. In general, though, the way to affect insulin resistance is sort of like what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about Sheila. When you have a lot of fat to lose, typically you're probably insulin resistant to a certain level. And so one of the ways to get that insulin resistance dealt with is similar to what I was suggesting, and that you would want to keep your insulin low. As your body fat lowers, oftentimes it will end up affecting your insulin sensitivity in a positive way, and you become better as a result. Um, what you know it's one of the things related to obesity is that when people are overly reliant upon glucose for energy, eating breads and sugars and all this other type of stuff. It's not that any of those things are bad in moderation, but like I was talking about earlier, when I was on my trip to Wyoming, you know, um, we had to stop at a Wendy's because there was literally no other option, and we stopped in on a Friday night, and I mean, it was like everybody in this town eats at Wendy's on a Friday night, and you go, oh, I get it, why everybody's struggling, with their weight. There's not a lot of options. There wasn't a lot of people like, signing up for the strawberry field salad, which, by the way, still has a ton of sugars in them, because of the the dressings and the candied walnuts and things of this nature. Um, and so you have to be kind of, mindful of those types of things. And so, we're fans of a flexible way of eating, but man, it is really, really difficult. And I think you can sort of get into this trend of not eating mostly whole foods when convenience is your life, when you're working second shift, when you're, have, 6 kids and it's difficult to prepare. And, those are all things that are kind of negatives. But I wasn't specifically relating to insulin resistance. I can't speak to whether or not insulin resistant people would be better off. My suggestion is that, you know, you'd probably want to keep their carbs relatively lowish. Maybe not zero, but it sort of depends on the level of insulin resistance. And so I don't want to, pretend to be a doctor. I'm not a doctor. We have doctors on staff. You can certainly ask them that question. But if as an example, you're going to be allotted 200 grams of carbohydrate, there's probably no reason negatively that having 50 grams of carbohydrate before your bed would be a negative. But you always want to throw out the caveat of everyone reacts somewhat differently, and I can't say I've done a great deal of research on how insulin resistant people. Here's the problem, though. Okay, I want to say this because this is what a lot of people believe, is they want to believe that something is the reason that they are holding on to fat. And so oftentimes people will go, I'm insulin resistant, or I'm not insulin sensitive, which essentially means that they're insulin resistant, as kind of, I'm not going to say it's an excuse, but it ends up being kind of an excuse. We know that you can affect insulin resistance very positively through exercise. You can do it through fasting. You can do it through caloric deficits on occasion. There's all these things that you can do. No one wants to do those things. And I'll tell you, as someone that gains weight on occasion for athletic reasons and then loses weight on occasions for athletic reasons, it's not fun to lose weight. It's not fun to do things that are uncomfortable. But when it's part of your life, you make it that priority. And I think for a lot of people, they're just not down for the discomfort. And so it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm insulin resistant, so that's why I have these issues. Well, we know that insulin resistance, unless you have a genetic reason like type 1 diabetes, you can affect that positively by tons of different ways. And so my guess is that it's probably not overly negative as it relates to sleep patterns and things of this nature. But once again, you want to talk to a doctor. You could message Spencer. I'm sure he would definitely have an opinion on it. He's not going to be able to give you medical advice unless, of course, were in his clinic. But he could give you some ideas and point you in the right direction. Um, Anyway, I think that is going to end our webinar. We did end up going a little bit longer, but we had a lot of great questions, and I think I was probably a little wordy today because I haven't done this in a while. Anything you want to end on, April, or are you just ready to tuck your kids into bed?
Okay, just welcome back. You did awesome. You hadn't been around in a couple weeks, and you jumped right back in.
Yeah, well, it's really fun. I kind of wish that I was talking about some of the things that I'm doing right now, but for those that are still hanging on, I'm doing a project on Instagram where for the next 10 weeks I'm going to take pictures of my food, potentially doing some food logging. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. I want to be able to do this the majority of the time without food logging, and I think that's going to be interesting to people, but we'll see. So I appreciate everybody being here, all the great questions, and we'll see you guys in the forums. Talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.
All right, so let's see.